Well, depending on how you look at it, Capcom didn't have the best weekend. I mean, they launched a really exciting video game, but some of the reception to microtransactions and other stuff afterwards, like performance, has been a little bit of a kerfuffle. Otherwise, though, I think I had a better weekend than Capcom. I went to PAX East 2024. It was awesome to be on the show floor, playing some indies, doing some shopping, checking out some AA games as well. One of my favorites on the show floor was Card and Seal, which is this Battle Network Slay the Spire hybrid, but it's anime. It's awesome. I really, really like that game. But perhaps the best thing about this weekend truly was meeting so many of you on the show floor. Like, usually when I get stopped at PAX East, it's 1 or 2 times. And I just love when anyone stops me, but I don't expect a high amount. But on Saturday, it was incredible. Like, 15 different people stopped me, and I don't say it as a flex, but just to thank all of you who took that time to communicate with me and show some love. I don't know how else to put it into words other than I really needed it. I really needed those words of affirmation in person and to kind of validate what I'm doing here. It meant a lot. It was a nudge I needed. So thank you to those of you who took a moment out of your day, stopped me, gave me some love, asked some questions, and just had a good time. But yeah, PAX East is always fun. It always rejuvenates my love for gaming. But to those of you who stopped me, seriously, I cannot thank you enough. So let's talk about Dragon's Dogma 2 in a bit of a left turn now. Dragon's Dogma 2, when all of the microtransactions came out, sunk to a rating of mostly negative after 12,000 reviews over the course of the weekend. It's since picked up because the content and the mechanics aren't really the problem with the game. It's what's surrounding it, and that's why it's now at a mixed 35,000 plus reviews. So for those who haven't tracked it, reviews came out ahead of the launch of the game. Very high praise, as we covered in our video about everything you need to know heading into the launch of the game. We did put a word of warning in the early parts of that video on performance, which we'll talk about more in this video. But what the surprise addition was after the game got into the consumer's hands was microtransactions. You'll see here on this list from Steam that there are 21 pieces of DLC ranging from the Explorer's Camping Kit to music to the Harpy Snare Smoke Beacons. You have the Art of Metamorphosis, the makeshift Gale Keys, Port Crystals, Wake Stones, Rift Crystals. Pretty much any meaningful reward in this game has been monetized. And Capcom has responded with a little update on their Steam page saying the following: to all the Dragon's Dogma 2 players, we would like to update you on the status of the following items, about which we've received numerous comments from the community. That's putting it one way. To all of those looking forward to this game, we sincerely apologize for any inconvenience like crashes and bug fixes where they are investigating / fixing critical problems such as crashes and freezing. The option of starting a new game will also be added to the Steam version where they allow players to start a brand new save file. Right now, for those who don't know, it's one save file that just overwrites for every manual save, every auto save. And I actually have a close friend of mine who lost 20 hours of save progress, and I think that probably wouldn't have happened if there were multiple save slots. So yeah, no overwriting this singular save file, hopefully moving forward. We also have an update here on paid DLC, which I think is a bit of a hint, hint, nudge, nudge from Capcom, where instead of budging or apologizing or doing anything, they just reiterate that many of the items you see that are on the DLC list can also be found in-game, like the Art of Metamorphosis, the Ambivalent Rift Incense, the Port Crystal, the Wake Stone, the Rift Crystals, the Makeshift Gale Key, the Harpy Snare Smoke Beacons. They say all of this can be found in-game. But the last part they talk about is frame rate in a comment that they also submitted to IGN, so a bit of a copy and paste here if you saw this one already. They say a large amount of the CPU usage is allocated to each character in calculating the impact of their physical presence in the various areas. In certain situations where numerous characters appear simultaneously, the CPU usage can be very high and may affect the frame rate. We are aware that in such situations, settings that reduce GPU load may currently have a limited effect. However, we are looking into ways to improve performance in the future. And that's where the post concludes. Now, for me personally, I can't offer too many takes on it. I picked up Dragon's Dogma early yesterday when I got home. I started my playthrough Sunday night. It's just early impressions, so I don't think it's very worthwhile. I will try to have a final verdict video out by the end of this week, just talking about my experience with Dragon's Dogma 2. But unfortunately, combining no review access with PAX East means that I'm getting a very late start compared to everyone. So I appreciate your patience on that. I think there's two big problems here with the microtransactions that have been added to this game. For starters, I just want to underline all this by saying I think we're at a point in the industry where we kind of get the necessity of some sort of monetization based on the budgets of these AAA games. It's kind of a necessary evil, or at least a necessary evil until we figure out how to minimize game budgets and development time and regulate things a little more properly. Like, we've navigated loot boxes and tried to get rid of those and get our hands on more cosmetic-oriented microtransactions. And I think sometimes these companies take it a step too far. To me, what I see with Dragon's Dogma 2, I didn't really blink at until I saw a pretty loud reaction from people, because Ubisoft really did this first. I remember it's been about half a decade ago, they've added consistently microtransactions to their games after launch. And I remember with Assassin's Creed Origins, they launched with some microtransactions, which I remember they told reviewers you couldn't show the storefront to. And they said that these were called, quote, time savers, end quote. And the idea was for the people who don't have the time to go and play all the side content, because a lot of these games from Ubisoft, specifically in that trilogy of Assassin's Creed games, whether it be Origins, Odyssey, which I do have a lot of love for, or even Valhalla, which I enjoy a lot. But yeah, very bloated game. A lot of their content was level gated, so you could only really skip by paying or by grinding a ton. And Ubisoft again coined the term time savers. And I feel like a lot of games since then have added their own version of time savers. Even one of my favorite JRPG series in Trails has a ton of time savers that give you tons and tons of items that you easily get for free in game, but some players just want them, don't want the headache, and that's that. Pretty much if you're watching this video, the microtransactions you see from Capcom for Dragon's Dogma 2 or in Assassin's Creed from Ubisoft aren't for you. And I'm not saying that as a point of defense, but clearly all of us here in the hardcore gaming scene push back against these, but it's because it's not for us, because we make the time to watch content, make content, and put a lot of hours into these games. But developers have really been speaking out about this. I'm a huge fan of Tekken. Tekken 8's one of my favorite games of the year, if not my totally favorite game of the year. I just beat the story Saturday, and I mean, oh my god, so gas. Katsuhiro Harada, who is the director of Tekken, had actually spoken out about the Tekken Shop, which was added after the launch of the game. And in this very long Twitter post, he says how development costs have multiplied. It's double or nearly triple the cost of Tekken 7 to make Tekken 8. The servers are costly to maintain. Lots of costs attached to this. Basically saying, hey, if you want us to keep updating this game, we need some sort of economic flow here. Going back to point A, I said I saw two problems with these microtransactions. For starters, I think it's because a lot of the microtransactions here undermine the intentional design decisions made by Capcom, which make Dragon's Dogma 2 special. And in turn, the community has responded with mods of their own, which also just fully undermined what this game does well. And so I feel like Capcom, by inclusion of these, has really shot themselves in the foot. I think a few of these being included isn't a problem, but so many of the core loot items in the game that involve a semblance of management have been monetized. And so, for example, Dragon's Dogma is not a series that you just get to pick a waypoint on the map, fast travel wherever you want. These are set up through port crystals, and you don't find many of these, especially in Dragon's Dogma 2. I had read in reviews, I can't speak from my own experience, but I know at least in Dragon's Dogma 1, you don't find a ton of these. They're not everywhere. They're not a common items, but that is by design. Part of the thrill of Dragon's Dogma, and in turn Dragon's Dogma 2, is the thrill and the danger of the open world and being sent out there. And it's a journey. Every step outside of your main hub city is a journey. In Dragon's Dogma 2, it was venturing out knowing any massive boss could attack you at any point in time. You had a point A and a point B, and how you got back was an afterthought because you'd have to figure it out once you got there. There's so many moment-to-moment decisions that make it inconvenient, but that's by design. And when you have microtransactions that undermine all of that, and then you have modders, as we'll show in a little bit, saying, well, hey, we're going to give this for free, and people downloading it in mass on PC, you've just undermined the whole point of Dragon's Dogma 2 by inclusion of these. Part 2 is that Capcom, you are the golden child. You're going to get scolded a bit more sternly than I would say other developers do. People expect this business out of Ubisoft. People expect this business out of 2K. But when Capcom is sort of leading the charge on massive AAA games, and I think barring Exoprimal, which I personally really liked, I'm not going to act as if it's on the level of a Resident Evil 8 or a Street Fighter 6 or what we've seen with Dragon's Dogma 2. I'm not going to pretend that, but I don't think they've put out a bad game in a long while. And so because of that, you've earned such a prized reputation. And that means that, number one, people are going to ignore things like some of the microtransactions in Street Fighter 6. Or number two, when you do something like this, people are going to scold you a little harder. On the performance side of things, I think people are just fed up. It's getting a little tiresome that AAA games are launching like garbage. Let's just put it that way, right? And so Capcom has announced an update they're planning for Dragon's Dogma 2 for all platforms. As you can see on screen right now, that they're adding the option to start a new game, as we read earlier, changing the number of Art of Metamorphosis items available at the Pawns Guild in the game to 99, thus alleviating some of the monetization pressure, making the quest that allows players to acquire their own dwelling available earlier in the game, fixing some miscellaneous bugs. They're also adding updates for PS5 and Series X and S, which are adding the option to switch off motion blur, ray tracing, and setting the frame rate to either variable or max 30 FPS in the options. And updates for Steam are going to improve quality while DLSS super resolution is enabled, and fixing an issue where models appear lower quality under some specific settings. What you may have noticed in the little asterisk at the middle of this update is that these options for the FPS cap on consoles are not going to affect the frame rate, but just limit it, and that they're going to plan frame rate improvements for later after launch. More and more, it's just looking like a game you probably want to hold out for a month or so and then pick it up, because it's a little messy right now. Let's be honest. It's a unique game. I love Dragon's Dogma. I'll sim for it every day, but it's a messy launch, and I don't think you need to spend $70 on something that's clearly a work in progress, which is really unfortunate. But it's so fascinating to see, not even a few days after launch, they add these frame rate caps, which I think would have done the game so many favors. So it doesn't mean it won't dip below 30, but it does mean that it won't go above 30, and it means a little bit more stability in your console playthrough. And so I'll do some testing with that and see how it all goes. But no denying, I think it'll be a little bit before we see a frame rate improvement of significance, especially because they said it has to do with the CPU attached to each individual character on screen. And there could be a lot of that when you have a big boss attacking you in a town where a lot of CPUs are active. But nonetheless, let's talk about mods. Dragon's Dogma 2 mods undercut Capcom's controversial microtransactions and dish out infinite save slots. So you'll see ones like here on Nexus from Crazy Shop, which includes everything from fairy stones to port crystals to camping kits, eternal wake stones. All of these are available for you to purchase. So instead of Capcom, being a little bit stingy with things like, again, port crystals or fairy stones, now you can get around the map with ease thanks to these mods, which again, I think undercuts the design. So I don't know if the response is great, but it shows people are so displeased with the microtransactions that when you look at the amount of downloads here, already over 30,000 people have downloaded this mod. And it's only just a couple of days old. And then there's a Dragon's Dogma 2 save manager here on PC, which will allow you to navigate your various different save files and load them up whenever you want through a save manager, which I do think is a lot more necessary and something Capcom should get on ASAP. And it's a bummer because what I've played of this game, again, I'm not going to be so affirmative in my opinion. It's early couple hour impressions, but this game's awesome, and I don't think that's taking away from any of it, but it's definitely a reminder that AAA is in a really messy spot where we're trying to strike this balance of making enough money, yet making the most ambitious games. And I'm not saying as a justification, but it's very apparent to me we're at this inflection point in AAA gaming where something's just got to give. Whether it's budget, time spent in development, which I guess kind of coexist, right? If one extends, so does the other. But I feel like we're at a point where we need to figure things out, because the surprise edition of microtransactions, I think we get that they can be added and they can be there, but the surprise, they're here after launch. Why? I don't think it hurts anyone's games knowing that they're going to be there, because it's so expected from AAA nowadays. It's so expected. So why not just have it there and let people see it for what it is? Especially because as a reviewer, I've had microtransactions snuck under my nose dozens of times. They just get added in after so many reviews. I think Diablo was one of them for people. I wasn't there, part of the early access review for that, but I know for a fact every Ubisoft game I cover, they always end up adding microtransactions after the fact. I know Activision did it when I reviewed one of their Call of Duty campaigns. They went, surprise, microtransactions afterwards. This is how publishers have been handling things, and it's distasteful, because for me to spend time covering your game, for others to spend time covering your game, and you make us look like idiots, you make us look like fools, because they barely come after Capcom. They come after the reviewers, and I saw a lot of reviewers online getting attacked. I think it's despicable, truly. Not the audience. I get they're pissed, but because of how these publishers set us up, they put us in deep shit with our audience for not knowing something was ever going to exist. So people assume other reviewers are shills, paid off. Like, just the worst of assumptions get laid at the feet of creators who knew no better. And it's cowardly because microtransactions are expected in all of these AAA games at this point. Would I like them not to be there? Of course. But do I know they're going to be there? Definitely. And the fact that they're so scared that they'll instead let a bunch of reviewers get all of the blowback, all of the heat, it's gross. Bad taste in my mouth. But nonetheless, Capcom got to do a little better in that regard. All of these publishers need to do better in that regard and stop setting up reviewers for failure. But when it comes to the monetization, I don't think it's the end of the world, but I definitely think they could have done way, way better here. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to your thoughts on Dragon's Dogma 2, its performance, its monetization, and all the drama surrounding the game. And of course, I'll be back later this week to talk more about Dragon's Dogma 2 from the gameplay standpoint, the story standpoint, all that fun stuff you get in your final verdict style reviews. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.